Not long after this, grandfather receives a letter from the capital informing him that my father attained a high level in the imperial examinations and is now a Jinshi scholar of the fourth rank. As such, he was presented to the emperor, who personally read father's essay. Already the Tan family, through my great grandfather, grandfather, and great uncle, is an established part of the provincial elite. Already our family holds enormous power and prestige. That my father has become a Jin Shi, having never needed to repeat an exam, gives him status in his own right while building the family's glory. To add to this triumph, he's entered the rank of Lesser Grand Master of the Palace and has been appointed to a position on the Board of Punishments in Nanjing, as my grandfather was. It is a great honor, but it will require him to travel from country to country, county to county, to investigate and rule on crimes. It's all wonderful, but it makes me sad too, because it means he'll continue to be far from the family. My grandparents can't stop smiling, though. We must have a celebration of this accomplishment, grandfather announces. I'll consult with the geomancer to find an auspicious day for our son to return home. Grandfather arranges for musicians to accompany my father to the mansion of Golden Light from a distance of 5 li, so our neighbors and their servants can celebrate our family's good news. Grandmother sends cooked by ingredients for a banquet and orders the gardeners to rearrange pots filled with hibiscus and orchids so the courtyards are filled with color. On the appointed day, everyone in the household, including women and girls who've been given the rare treat of being allowed to join the menfolk, gather outside the main gate to await my father's arrival. Miss Zhao has taken great care with her appearance and that of my brother. She's even combed my hair and chosen my clothes to show what a good caretaker she's been in my father's absence. Despite the teasing she's received in the inner chambers, she's acted as a good wife since my mother died. As if to prove this to my father, she holds my brothers and my hands, so we look like wife and children who faithfully waited for their master to return. I'm eager to see my father, but I'm also excited to be outside of the gate, having believed this wouldn't happen until my wedding day. Before I can begin to soak in my surroundings, though, the air fills with the sounds of clappers, cymbals, and drums, the braying of pack animals, the clank and jingle of the metalwork on their harnesses. The noise grows louder until the procession comes into view. At the front, 3 pairs of men carry red banners mounted on tall poles. I see my father in a sedan chair, riding high above those who carry him. This will be his life from now on. For a Jinshi is so elevated in position that his feet should never touch the ground unless absolutely necessary. Behind him, a palanquin and several carts follow. My father steps down from the sedan chair. He wears his scholar's hat, a straight-cut loose robe belted with a black sash and leather boots. An elaborately embroidered square patch has been sewn into the chest of his tunic. It shows a pair of wild geese, which announces to anyone who sees it, peasant or nobleman, that he is an official of the fourth rank, which grandfather has told me is just 4 levels below the emperor himself. My father brings his hands together until they've been hidden beneath his sleeves, and he bows formally to Grandfather Tan and Grandmother Ru. He watches as servants present gifts to his parents, Yifeng and me. But that is not all. As box after box of goods are unloaded and brought through the gate, the door to the palanquin opens and a young woman steps down, gracefully holding up the hem of her skirt to reveal a slim stocking ankle and a bound foot in a shoe of emerald green silk embroidered in a pattern of subtle delicacy. Her gown is the color of bamboo sprouting in spring, but embroidered with the white, heavy chrysanthemums of fall. Blue sapphire earrings hang from her lobes. Her complexion is as white as goose fat. Her makeup accentuates her fine brows, and her hair is swept up not in the fashionable style of a concubine, but in the elegant combings of a wife. Miss Zhao's hands tighten around my own as the woman makes obeisance to my grandparents. Then my father takes her by the elbow and introduces her to the relatives that matter most. Finally, father brings her to us. Daughter, son, he says, ignoring Miss Zhao. Please meet your new mother. You will call her respectful lady. I'm the first of the three of us to lower myself to the ground to show deference to my father's new wife. As my forehead touches the stonework, words the original White Jade once spoke enter my mind. Whether animal or woman, we are a man's possession. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. I debated on whether or not I wanted to revisit this book because it's a rough one. It's so good. Lisa C., look at me. You did a good one with Lady Tan's Circle of Women. And even the reason I bought this book, I didn't know Lisa C. had published anything new when I was at the bookstore. But I was feeling like a new novel. I was about to have surgery about this time last year, and I wanted a book to read for when I was feeling better. So I was looking around, and I saw just the cover. And then I saw who it was. I didn't care what the book was about. I was like, Lisa C. wrote a book. So I gotta have it. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you know that I have a special place in my heart for female Asian authors. So, you know, specifically mostly out of China, Japan, and I've dipped my toe into Korea now. I just find those women's stories particularly fascinating because they tell so much of what women through history have had to go through, and tell it in such a way that shows not just what women had to go through, but why they went through it. And then whatever societal logic was behind the rules that were assigned. And for some reason, these stories, they go straight to my core. They get me. I'm just like, man, I will never be that strong. I could not have been born 1,000 years ago. This mouth would have gotten my head cut off real quick. Like the day I started talking would have been the day I talked back. You know, but I decided to revisit it. And because at the time I'm filming this, I'm going through some sad times in my life. My mother is in hospice at the time of recording. By the time this video comes out, she will most likely have passed. And it's just making me want to get into escapism because, you know, we're pro-escapism here. That reminds me of that bond of mother and daughters and why things are the way they are. And I read last month from Amy Tan, the Joy Luck Club, you know, about 4 women who were bound together because of what they suffered as young girls in China and knowing their own mother's stories and then trying to pass on their knowledge but not their grief to their daughters. And that thought process brought me back here. So it's a way to help me process, but process in a positive way. But how could such a story be positive? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let's get into it. So if you've not been familiar with this book, I'm not going to spoil the whole thing, but it's basically based on a true figure, Lady Tan, who was a rare female doctor in Confucian China. And she only treated women. She did not treat men, because that was the whole thing. Because, you know, back then, they thought that every ailment that a woman had was, oh, she's in a bad mood, she's on her period. Like, that was the diagnosis. But our titular character, the eventual Lady Tan, she is fortunate enough to be born into a very wealthy family, and she is the granddaughter of doctors. Her grandfather is an imperial doctor, and her mother came from a doctoring family as well, and they trained her to treat women, and eventually Lady Tan is able to learn how to treat women. It's a fight for her to be able to practice, and there are some things that happen that towards the end of this book, I ain't gonna spoil for you. You can be traumatized all on your own. Trigger warning. You'll know when you get to that chapter. It's still powerful though. But when I first read this book, it was all about how Lady Tan as a child saw her mother's passing. Remember, we do not cast judgment on a society. We evaluate works within the context in which they're written. Just because it's not the society I grew up in does not mean I get to go, oh, that was wrong. I mean, there are things that are objectively wrong, but we are evaluating and enjoying a work of fiction within its context. Yes, yes. Okay. When we first meet our titular character when she's young, her mother is in the process of dying. Um, Her father, as is allowed in Confucian society, does have a concubine, and the concubine has a son. The reason he took a concubine is because a smallpox epidemic hit the countryside. Um, and when she's a young girl, our main character, she gets the smallpox and is left with like a little bit of a scar, which, oh my God, like literally it's a whole thing. Like how could, look at that blight there. She still marries into a good family because her family wealthy and well known, so she's fine. Um, but her mother, her actual biological mother, who is her father's first wife, a respectful lady, um, she loses her son. There is a son, but the son is lost, and she basically falls into despair after that. Um, when women were still binding their feet, it was a lifelong process to take care of them because these are literally feet that have been broken in half in early girlhood and then remanipulated. The possibility for infection and stuff was really high, so if you didn't take care of them for your whole life, um, yeah, and that's basically what happens. Is her method of taking herself out, respectful lady, after losing her son, is she stops taking care of her feet, and then sepsis creeps in and it takes her out, and her daughter is there and watches that, and she sees it and she wishes she could have done something, but she doesn't know that in the future she's going to have the ability to save women. It's kind of beautiful, actually. It's tragic, but it's beautiful. Well, her father has a concubine. When he and respectful lady no longer have a physical relationship, he still loves his wife. It's weird. Like every one of these stories that I read, except for a couple, the men love their wives, but they are allowed to have others because producing sons is all that matters. And they're allowed. So that's all I can say about that right now. Um, but his concubine Miss Zhao does produce a son. And Miss Zhao is very dutiful in attending to respectful lady and taking care of her son and technically her daughter, because the way it works there, you get to inherit children somehow. And it is assumed after respectful lady dies that Miss Zhao will rise to the rank of wife, and her father doesn't do that. He goes out and gets a whole new wife, which that's like a huge slap in the face to her because she stayed behind and took care of her son and the daughter that is not biologically hers as if they were hers, and she does a real good damn job of doing it. And he still gets another wife. And basically, our titular character only sees her father, as far as I can see in this book, like 3 times. He doesn't even come to her wedding. He comes home when he gets his promotion. Um, no, 2 more times, and then he comes home because there's some big to-doings at the end of the book that I will not spoil. It's a whole mystery that runs through the whole book, and she wrapped it up real good. It's great. I cannot spoil that for you. But she only sees her father for a couple of times, and the first time she sees her father after her mother's funeral, and she's been sent to live with her grandparents, with the concubine and her baby brother, her father sent his life away. Like he would, it's heartbreaking but understandable at the same time. He was in so much grief over losing respectful lady that he couldn't look at his kids. I am not saying that's okay. Look, you can't be abandoning your children because you're sad. That is not okay. Don't do that. That's nobody said do that. But that's what he did because he was allowed to. He started a whole new life, and she actually didn't even think she was going to see her father. That's how much she knows about her own society. I'm not going to see my dad till I get married, and he pops up with his new rank and his new wife, and so much, and just that was a page and a half, well, 2 pages total, that I read. We see so much in there. She knows what her place is in this society. She knows that she, as a daughter, is lucky to have any attention from her father at all. The fact that he even came home for a day was a big deal. And he only came home to pay honor to his parents because of his rank. Because that's what you do. Your rank isn't just for you, it's for your whole family. The whole family gets elevated. And he introduces this new wife, who is his children's new mother, to everybody but them kids. So that tells you where they rank. Even his son ranks lower than everybody else. And that even shows you what he is so devastated over respectful lady, that for him to not even want to raise his son in that society, that says a lot. Like, he is just grief stricken. And from what I understand, he does not have a child with the new wife. She's basically a paid companion, which that's another level of sadness. Like, you look and think, oh, look, she gets to be the wife. When they say a young girl stepped out, this girl's probably 15. Let's be real clear about that. His new wife is probably a good 35, and she about 15. Let's just be clear about that. So she's in a gilded cage, but her family, because of who she's married, probably got elevated as a result of her marrying this great man. And that's just what women were back then. They were, what was that last line? Whether animal or woman, we are a man's possessions. That's how it worked back then. Men could do as they would. But one of the things I've learned from reading these stories is that even if society has things set up in such a way that in our modern sensibilities, we read these things and go, oh, who could live like this? There's still that love. Remember that line that Lisa C. writes so much? I was a pearl in my father's palm. It's in several of her books, mostly in Snowflower and the Secret Fan, but it signifies that even though Confucius rules for women basically delegate women as property, that fathers still had a special love for their daughters and their wives. Even if society found it improper for them to say so, it was there. And at the time of this book happening, and when Lady Tan grows up and becomes Lady Tan, the emperor of her adulthood actually only has one wife. He basically is like, I think it's ridiculous y'all out here having a whole bunch of wives, because the Chinese symbol for chaos, the Chinese symbol for peace is a house with one woman in it, but the symbol for chaos is a house with multiple women in it. I'm sorry women, it's true. it's true. Like, when me and my mother lived together back in Nashville, I built us a brand new home, and we lived in a couple of different houses together. But that house had 4 bathrooms. You want peace among women? Everybody needs their own bathroom. Everybody needs their own toilet. All right. I had actually given my mother in that home, it was a 3-story townhome, the owner's suite on the 2nd floor. So she had the biggest bedroom in the house and the biggest bathroom. And then I had a 3rd story added on, and that was my bedroom. I had the top floor, but I had a nice big balcony out there, so it was cool. But that's what we learn through the stories, is even though society may set things up to be a certain way, that doesn't mean the love still isn't there. Because what we learn through Lady Tan's story is that when she really needed her father, he came back. And when she watches her mother dying, her mother's big concern, even though she knows she's going to meet the ancestors soon, she wants to impart life lessons to her daughter. She still brings her daughter and her son into her room to read to them, to teach them their letters and their calligraphy, to make sure their education is on track, because that's what a mother's love is. The actual symbol for a mother's love has pain in it. Pain and heart, because that's what a mother's love is made of. It's the pain of her own girlhood and upbringing and everything she had to endure, and the desire to protect her daughter from that, but she can't. She knows her daughter is going to have to go through the same pain she did. Her daughter's going to get a mother-in-law. Her daughter has to have her feet bound. Her daughter will have to bear children. Her daughter will be property to her husband. She will watch her husband love other women and have children with other women. Her life will be pain. And if I love my daughter, I'm going to love her enough to bring her through that pain, to teach her how to bear up. Because I, as respectful lady, my title means I don't have the ability to rail against my husband. I cannot change the society, but I can teach my daughter how to make her way in this society and be her own whole person. And that's what Respectful Lady gives to her daughter. And that's why Lady Tan is able to grow up into someone who is kind of revolutionary. Even though she's a doctor that only treats women, she's still a woman with an education. And in this society, that ain't a thing. Okay? That's not a thing in this world. And she saves the lives of lots of women and babies through her learning. And her writings are still available today to see what she learned and how she passed it on. When I think about that, one of the things I mentioned in the review when I looked at Joy Luck Club was that we weren't there for our parents' childhood. That those are mysteries we will never know. But we inherit from our parents, if they do their job well, even though there is pain, that pain should produce the ability for the next generation to be stronger. Because none of us created the societies that we're in. I've mentioned it several times. Like I'm well aware. I'm a black African descended female in modern America, and this is a good place to be for me. If I was born 50 years ago, 100 years ago, my life would be completely different. I'm well aware of that. And I'm well aware that there are pains that people before me went through so that I could do different and be different. It would be a sad way to pay respect to those who came before me and went through so much pain. Like, I mean, side story, my mother was the valedictorian of her high school, but it was the first integrated high school where she's from. We're from the South, so that's all you need to know. And they would not allow her to graduate as valedictorian. And my parents, were they perfect? They were not. We all got some stuff we need to go talk to a counselor about. Okay, go pay that $100 an hour and just go do it. But I do also recognize the sacrifices my parents made for me. The closer I get to my mom's transition, the more I realize how much she loves me and how much she sacrificed and how happy she is that her daughter turned out to be such a person as I am. And I'm proud that I was able to bring her a worthy son-in-law. I'm proud that I've been able to take care of her, and that as a daughter, I've been able to pay back to my mother the love that she's owed. You know, women like Miss Jow, who sit there and suffer in silence and still do the right thing. At least he didn't cast her out because she ends up being allowed to stay, but she never has rank or prestige anymore, but she still dutifully raises these children. Lady Tan can never have men's learning, but she still works so hard and remembers her mother and puts so much into her learning so that she can save other women from the same fate as her mother. My mother did so much in her life, and she had suffering, but she also had joy. She had me. I'm the greatest joy of all. No, I'm joking. She had a daughter and a son. Let me tell you something. Look, y'all, you out there having kids. I don't have any biological children. I'm a stepmother. Thank God one of them's a girl. My husband's one of those rare examples of a man who's like all in helping his parents. But let me tell you, at the assisted living, at the nursing home, it's mostly women doing the caring. You better keep trying until you get a girl. I'm just saying. Girls do the caring. But it makes me, at this time, just have deeper love and respect for my mom. A mother's love is pain. We have to hurt and sacrifice so that our children can have. But we equally have to prepare our children for the hurt and sacrifice that will inevitably be a part of their lives. There's no avoiding it. There's no such thing as a life without pain. Even people that you look and think because materially they have everything, and I wish I had that, trust me, they have pain that you know nothing about. Because getting to a certain level of elite society requires things that you don't want to know about. And all of us who think we want that, if we really knew what they were going through behind closed, we don't want that. We don't want that. I was on the path to be an actress. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the theater. And the more I learned about the industry, the more I was like, this might not be for me. And I changed career paths real fast. Because there were just things I wasn't willing to do, and I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to put myself in that position. I actually remember, and this isn't even been on the theater side of things, but once upon a time I wanted to be a children's minister, and which I still teach kids, but I wanted to do it like as a children's director at a church. And I was being trained to do so. And it was a couple that was training me, husband, wife, children's pastors team. And I was really close with them, and I was really close with the wife. And in one of our training sessions, she said to me, she told me a story about when she was younger. When I tell you, this woman is beautiful. She's beautiful. Her and her husband, one of them couples that you look at him and go, how he get her? Look, I said it in a video I just recorded. Like when I was talking about harem anime, like when love is love, it's love. It has nothing to do with looks. There's something else there, and that's what keeps people together. Because he loved this woman and she loved him. She knows she's loved and protected by this man. She ain't going nowhere. But she gorgeous. When I tell you, she's just one of those objectively beautiful women, and it's like, good for you, you know. But she told me about a time a really well known. I'm not gonna say who it was, but this really well known prosperity gospel preacher, and I won't get into my feelings on that because that's not what we do on this channel. Um, Blatantly hit on her, and this was a married man with children. And she told me about that story, and I thought she was telling me to tell me, like, you know, who in HR do I go tell, or, you know, how do we bring down this creep? No, she was telling me how to handle it and not ruin somebody's reputation. I was like, oh my God. And I rethought that line of work as well. She was telling me, whether I agree with it or not, that there are things that you can't do anything about, and you have to make a decision on what you're going to do. And the decision I made was, I can't be you. I can't do that. Because who will punch somebody in their throat is me. Like, I can catch a charge over something like that. Like, it won't bother me a bit. I got a good reputation and a clean record. I can catch one charge for them kind of shenanigans. But it's that same kind of love. I can't keep this world from being terrible, but let me prepare you for the reality of what's out there. It's amazing if we really dig into the history of our mothers and our fathers, that if we are blessed to live in this modern Western world with all the opportunity, the things that they sacrificed and went through so that we could have this life. Lady Tan's mother and her surrogate mother and concubine, Zhao, they went through, and they tried to prepare her for what was to come. And I think she honors them well in this story by becoming just an amazing woman. If you are looking for a deep read, it's gonna make you sad. There are a couple of scenes in here that when I got to them, I had to put the book down. Now, to be fair, I read this book in a day. I was on leave from work and had nothing else to do. I was laying in a recliner. I read it in like a day and a half. There were a couple of times I had to put the book down for like an hour because it went full Maiden Abyss, the movie, for a minute. But it is a beautiful story, and knowing that it's based on a person that really existed makes it more beautiful. When we're processing heavy things, find escapism that lets you separate from what you're going through and see it through a different lens, because that protects our emotions but still lets us process what we're going through without it becoming so heavy that it drags us down. It's a beautiful story, and I highly recommend. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.